At my sister's wedding, my father looked me in the eye and said, "You're getting nothing." I laughed because by then I already owned it all. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 26 years old, and if you had met me when I was younger, you probably wouldn't have noticed me. That's how my family treated me too, like I was there but never really counted. My father, Richard Carter, liked control more than anything else. He measured his worth in money, in what he owned, and in how much power he had over others. That's how he treated me, like I was another thing to manage, not a daughter to care for. I grew up with one sister, Lauren. She was the golden child, and my father made sure the world knew it. She got everything she wanted before she even had to ask. New clothes, trips, gifts, anything. When people talked about our family, it was always about her. She was the shining star, and I was just the quiet one in the corner. Then there was my mother, Carol. She wasn't cruel, but she wasn't strong either. She kept her head down and followed my father's rule. If he dismissed me, she stayed silent. If he bragged about Lauren, she smiled and agreed. She never stood up for me, not once. She would just whisper, "Don't take it to heart, Emma," as if those words could erase years of being overlooked. On the outside, we looked like the perfect wealthy family. Big house, polished cars, nice clothes. People saw us and thought we had everything together. But behind the walls, things were different. Birthdays showed the truth. Lauren's presence filled the room while mine fit in a single small box. When Lauren turned 16, my father gave her a brand new car with a bow on top. When it was my turn, I got the keys to Mom's old station wagon and a pat on the back. It was small things like that, repeated again and again, that left their mark. I didn't complain, but I remembered. Every slight, every insult, every way my father made it clear I was second. Each moment added up like stones in my chest, heavy but shaping me into something stronger. By the time I turned 18, I already knew the truth. My father wasn't going to leave me anything. The money, the business, the house, Lauren would get it all. That's how he planned it, and that's how she expected it. To them, it was already decided. But while they underestimated me, I stayed quiet and I watched. I listened when they thought I wasn't paying attention. I learned from every mistake they made. And slowly, I began to understand something they never believed I was capable of. I could build a life of my own, one that didn't depend on them. They thought I would always be the forgotten daughter. They didn't see what was coming. When I think back to being a kid, the first memories that come to me are the differences between me and my sister. Lauren always had more than enough. Her room was filled with the newest toys, the prettiest clothes, and the things I used to dream about. If she wanted something, it appeared almost instantly. I remember watching her unwrap gifts on Christmas morning, box after box stacked higher than she was, while I sat with just a few things in my lap, pretending not to notice. It didn't stop as we got older. When we reached high school, Lauren was given her own car the day she turned 16. It was shiny, brand new, and came with a bow on the hood. She bragged about it for weeks, showing it off to her friends, who all looked at me like I should be jealous. They weren't wrong. I was. I didn't even have the option of borrowing a family car. Instead, I picked up shifts at a local diner after school, saving every tip and every dollar just to afford bus tickets or rides from classmates. While Lauren was cruising around town, I was scrubbing tables and counting coins to make it through the week. My father never missed an opportunity to remind me where I stood. If I asked for help, he called me a burden. If I mentioned my part-time job, he laughed and said it was cute, that I thought I could get anywhere working like that. Lauren never had to hear those words. For her, he had nothing but praise. She was the pride of the family, while I was the one he tolerated. The moment that cut the deepest came one evening when I passed by his office. The door was cracked open, and I heard him talking on the phone. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, like he was reading off a grocery list. He was explaining his will. He spoke about the house, the business, the money, all of it going to Lauren. Not one word about me. Not one thought about the daughter who had been working since she was old enough to. I stood there frozen, my hand on the frame of the door, trying to make sense of it. I don't know why I was surprised. Deep down, I always knew it would end that way. But hearing it out loud felt like the ground dropped from under me. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was betrayal written in his own plans for the future. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling for hours. I felt a mix of anger, hurt, and something else I couldn't name at first. It was the beginning of resolve. If they weren't going to give me a place in that family, then I would make my own place in the world. Quietly, without them knowing, I decided I'd find a way to stand on my own. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their money. One day, I would have more than they ever expected. College was supposed to feel like a fresh start, but for me it became another reminder of how uneven the ground beneath my feet really was. When the acceptance letters came, Lauren's news was met with celebration. My father boasted about paying every cent of her tuition, about how she'd never have to worry about money while she studied. For me, it was different. He slid my letter back across the table and told me if I wanted to go, I'd have to figure it out myself. No savings, no offer of help, just a sharp reminder that I wasn't worth investing in. So I worked. I balanced classes during the day and late shifts at night. Sometimes it was waiting tables, sometimes it was tutoring, sometimes it was weekend jobs that drained every bit of energy I had. Lauren, meanwhile, walked across campus without a care in the world, always dressed in the best clothes, always carrying the newest phone. She was free to focus on fun while I worried about whether I could make rent or afford textbooks. The worst moment came during a family dinner when I was home on break. We were all gathered around the table, and my father started bragging about Lauren's grades, her internships, her future. Then he turned to me, his voice carrying that mocking edge he used so well, and said, "Emma, maybe one day Lauren will hire you to work for her. You'd be lucky to have a sister like her take you in." Laughter followed, sharp and cutting. I forced a smile, but inside something shifted. I knew in that instant I would never, ever let his words come true. I didn't argue back. I didn't defend myself. I kept quiet and let them enjoy their joke. But in my silence, I was making a promise to myself. Whatever it took, however hard it was, I would not end up beneath my sister. I would never give my father the satisfaction of being right. The chance to prove it came sooner than I expected. After years of saving, every extra dollar folded away, I finally had enough to do something more than just survive. I bought a small apartment, nothing fancy, nothing in a good neighborhood, but it was mine. I fixed it up with my own hands, and for the first time, I felt the smallest spark of independence. On the side, I started experimenting with small projects to earn more, buying old furniture, repairing it, and selling it again. It wasn't much, but it was a step. It wasn't about greed or even revenge at that point. It was about survival, about proving to myself that I wasn't the helpless burden my father made me out to be. Each move I made gave me a little more control, and each step forward hardened that vow I had whispered in my own. I wouldn't end up working for Lauren. I would build something of my own, something no one could take from me. While Lauren loved showing off every new purse, every trip, and every expensive dinner, I stayed quiet. I learned early that sharing anything with my family only gave them more chances to tear me down. So I kept my life private. I worked, I saved, and I didn't explain myself. If they asked what I was doing, I gave short answers. It wasn't worth the laughter or the comments that always followed. It wasn't easy. I didn't wake up one morning and suddenly have success. It was years of slow progress, trial and error, and more mistakes than I care to admit. I started small, renting places to live, moving when I found better deals, saving whatever I could. Along the way, I studied how things worked. I read about property, about loans, about investments. Bit by bit, I realized there was a path for me if I was patient enough to walk it. My first attempt at business was renting out a spare room. It didn't make much, but it showed me the idea could work. From there, I took on extra shifts, saved harder, and paid close attention to the market. I saw opportunities others ignored. It was nothing flashy, nothing quick. Just steady progress, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. Whenever my father caught wind of what I was doing, he brushed it off with a smirk. "You? Real estate? Don't waste your time," he'd say. Lauren was no better. She'd laugh about how I was pretending to be serious, how no one would ever see me as more than a side project, and I let them think that. Their ridicule fueled me more than it hurt me. Every insult was like a spark, pushing me to work harder. In the meantime, I was slowly building connections. People I met at work, landlords willing to give advice, even a few older investors who didn't mind answering my questions. I listened carefully, learned from their mistakes, and never let on to my family how serious I was about it. They thought I was just stumbling through life. That was fine by me. The turning point came when I signed papers for my very first property in my own name. It was small, nothing anyone in my family would have bragged about, but for me it was everything. Holding those keys in my hand, knowing no one could take it away, gave me a sense of freedom I had never felt before. I didn't tell my father. I didn't tell Lauren. I didn't even tell my mother. It was mine, and for once I didn't need their approval. I learned that Lauren had known about the will long before I ever did. She hadn't just kept it to herself. She went around bragging about it, laughing about how one day everything would be hers while I would be left with nothing. People told me she even joked about it, as if my future and my life were just entertainment for her. Hearing that made my stomach turn. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I went to my mother and asked her straight out, "Did you know Dad plans to give everything to Lauren?" She froze, her hands still for a moment, and I hoped she would deny it. I hoped she would finally tell me something different. But after a long silence, she sighed and admitted she knew. She said Dad had decided years ago, and nothing she said could ever change it. I felt anger rush through me. "Why didn't you ever tell me? Why didn't you stand up for me?" I asked her. She shook her head and said softly, "I can't go against your father. It's better not to fight him." Hearing that crushed me in a way I can't even explain. It wasn't only about money. It was about realizing that my own mother wouldn't choose me, not even once. That night I lay awake feeling more abandoned than ever. For so long, I had carried a small hope that maybe she was on my side, that maybe she cared more than she showed. But that hope disappeared. I knew then that I was alone in this family. The disappointment cut me deep, but at the same time, something sharper grew inside me. If they all thought I was worth nothing, then I would build my own worth without them. When I saw Lauren next, I confronted her too. I asked her if she had really been bragging about the will. She didn't deny it. Instead, she smiled in that smug way she always did and told me not to worry. She said she'd look out for me once everything was hers, as if I should be grateful for her scraps. Hearing her pretend to be generous while knowing she was lying lit a fire in me. That was the moment I stopped expecting fairness, love, or loyalty from any of them. I finally understood I couldn't count on my parents, and I couldn't count on Lauren. I only had myself. And if that was the case, then I was going to make sure that one day I would never need any of them again. Years of grinding shaped me into someone my family never expected. What started with one small property grew slowly, step by step. I worked long hours, saved carefully, and reinvested everything I could. At first, I only focused on real estate, finding places others overlooked, fixing them up, and renting them out. But after a while, I realized I could branch out. I started buying into small businesses. A cafe on the edge of town, a laundromat that needed new machines, even a repair shop where the owner wanted out. Nothing was glamorous, but they brought in steady money, and each one gave me more ground to stand on. I never showed any of this to my family. To them, I was still the quiet one with nothing going on. That was fine with me. While Lauren was showing off her designer bags and expensive dinners, I was signing papers that gave me control of buildings, storefronts, and land. She thought I was stuck in place, but every year I was climbing higher, even if no one could see it. The sweetest victories came when I started buying properties my father once owned. Over the years, he made mistakes with money, taking on debts he thought he could handle. When he was forced to sell, I paid close attention. I used my savings and connections to buy some of those places, quietly taking what he once bragged about. I never rubbed it in his face. I didn't need to. Just holding the keys was enough. There was one property in particular that meant more than the rest. I remembered being a child, sitting in the back seat of his car, listening to him boast about owning it. He said it was proof of his success, that people respected him because of it. Years later, when it went up for sale, I made sure it was mine. Signing my name on that deed felt like closing a circle. It wasn't about the building. It was about knowing I had taken something he thought defined him, and he didn't even realize. Even with all of this, I stayed quiet. I didn't post about it. I didn't brag. I didn't even hint at it to Lauren or my parents. When we met for family dinners, Lauren still smirked at me, tossing comments about how I was barely getting by, and how Dad would always take care of her. My father nodded in agreement, proud of her and dismissive of me. I let them talk. I smiled politely. I gave them nothing. What they didn't see was how far I had already gone. Every property, every small business, every late night I had pushed through, it all added up. My revenge wasn't loud or sudden. It was slow, steady, and building every day. By the time they would realize it, it would already be too late. When Lauren announced her engagement, it felt like the entire family's world shifted. She had met David, a wealthy banker with the kind of background my father had always dreamed about. The moment Richard learned who he was, he acted as if Lauren had secured not just a husband but a crown. To him, this wasn't just a wedding, it was a display of status. He poured money into it like water, sparing no expense, making sure every detail was bigger and brighter than the last. I heard about the plans in fragments. A ballroom booked months in advance, flowers ordered from across the country, dresses that cost more than some of my investment. My father walked around beaming, telling anyone who would listen that his daughter was marrying into a proper family. He didn't mean me, of course. He meant Lauren, the golden child. When the invitation finally arrived, it felt more like an afterthought than a gesture of love. The envelope was thick and glossy, but the words inside were cold. There was no personal note, no warmth, just my name printed in the same script as every other guest. Even so, I knew I would go. Not because they wanted me there, but because I wanted to see it for myself, to stand in the middle of what they thought was their perfect world and remind myself how far I had come on my own. The rehearsal dinner set the tone before the wedding even began. I sat at the edge of the long table, surrounded by people who looked at me like I didn't belong. The wine glasses sparkled, the laughter rolled easily, but every word seemed to push me farther from the circle. Lauren played the perfect bride-to-be, glowing in her white dress, but her eyes found me more than once. At one point, she leaned over with a sweet smile that didn't match her words. "You're lucky you even got invited," she said softly, just loud enough for me to hear. Her friends at the table laughed, covering their mouths like it was some harmless joke. I smiled back, not giving her the satisfaction of a reaction, but inside, I felt the fire burn hotter. Richard didn't notice, or maybe he chose not to. He was too busy praising David, too busy showing off as though this marriage was his personal achievement. I sat quietly, letting them all think I was still the outsider they believed me to be. By the end of the night, I knew my choice was the right one. I would go to the wedding. Not for Lauren, not for my father, not even for appearances. I would go for myself, to stand tall in front of the very people who had spent years telling me I was nothing. During speeches, Richard makes a cruel public remark. He lifted his glass, smiling wide at the crowd, his voice loud enough to reach every corner of the room. He spoke about Lauren and David, praising them as if they were the only people who mattered in the family. Then he turned his head toward me, his smile sharpening. "And of course," he said, pausing for effect, "Lauren will inherit everything one day. Emma knows she's getting nothing." The laughter that followed was awkward. Some guests chuckled politely, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I felt every eye on me, waiting to see if I would sink into myself, waiting for me to play the part of the forgotten daughter. But I didn't. Something in me snapped, not with tears or shame, but with a strength that had been building for years. I pushed my chair back and stood. The scraping sound cut through the clinking glasses and half-hearted laughs. I let out a laugh of my own, loud and real, not forced like theirs. It rang across the hall, stopping conversations, pulling every gaze to me. My father's smirk faltered, confusion flickering across his face. I looked at him, calm but unshaken. "I don't need anything from you, Dad," I said, my voice clear and steady, "because what you thought you owned already belongs to me." The words dropped like a stone in water, sending ripples through the crowd. Gasps and whispers spread instantly. Guests turned to one another, trying to understand what I meant. My father's face drained of color, his confident grin twisting into disbelief. Lauren stiffened beside him, her glass frozen in midair, her eyes wide as if she couldn't process what I had just said. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause. For years, I had been the one they overlooked, the one they mocked. And now, in a single moment, I had shattered the image they held of me. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to explain. My words alone were enough to shift the ground beneath them. I sat back down slowly, my heart pounding but my face steady. Around me, the whispers grew louder, guests leaning in to ask one another what I meant, trying to piece it together. But I stayed quiet, letting the weight of my words hang in the air. For the first time, I wasn't the one being laughed at. I calmly explained, not bragging, just telling the truth. I've been buying properties. I've been building businesses. I've been taking control of assets piece by piece, I said, my voice steady. While you all thought I had nothing, I was building everything. The room went quiet. I could feel the eyes on me, the way guests shifted in their chairs, no longer sure whether to laugh or stay silent. I didn't rush my words. I wanted them to sink in, every syllable cutting through the glitter and noise of the wedding. I turned my eyes toward my father. "You've spent years bragging about what you owned," I said evenly. "But some of those properties you were so proud of? They're mine now. I bought them quietly. I signed the papers myself. And I didn't need a dime from you to do it." My father's face changed in a way I had never seen. His skin flushed red, his jaw locked tight, and for the first time in my life, he had no quick remark, no cruel laugh to throw back at me. His silence was louder than anything else in that hall. I looked at Lauren. She sat frozen in her white dress, her smile gone. Her hands clenched around her glass, and her eyes burned into me with disbelief. She had spent her whole life believing she was untouchable, but now she looked small, as if the ground beneath her had shifted. David leaned toward her, whispering something sharp, his face tight with suspicion. I didn't give them more. I didn't list numbers, I didn't detail contracts, I didn't need to. I had said enough for every single person in that room to understand the truth, that the daughter they all dismissed had already taken pieces of the empire my father thought was his. The whispers started again, louder this time, spreading across the tables like fire. People leaned in, wide-eyed, their voices low but urgent. My father sat in silence, his pride shattered in front of them all. I didn't wait for their reactions. I pushed back my chair, the sound sharp against the marble floor, and stood tall. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the reception. My steps were slow, steady, certain. I didn't look back. I left them with their shock, their whispers, and their broken pride, while I carried only myself, head high, heart steady. My father tried to contact me after the wedding, his number lighting up my phone again and again. Sometimes his voice on the messages was full of anger, demanding explanations. Other times he tried to sound calm, pretending we could sit down and fix things. I ignored it all. I didn't owe him a single answer. For years, I had been the one he ignored, the one he called a burden. Now he was the one chasing after me, and my silence was the only reply he would ever get. After that night, trouble began to circle around Lauren. Her marriage to David, which had been celebrated like some royal event, started showing cracks almost immediately. David had overheard enough whispers during the wedding to make him curious, and it didn't take long for him to learn the truth. He discovered that my success was real, that my businesses and properties had been growing while my father's so-called empire was sinking under debt. The image he had been sold, that Lauren was the princess inheriting it all, was nothing more than a lie. I didn't have to be near them to see the fallout. I heard through others that their home was filled with arguments, David questioning her, Lauren scrambling for excuses. The truth had found its way into her marriage, and no amount of smiles or sweet words could cover it anymore. In the middle of all this, my mother reached out. Her voice was soft, almost trembling, when she called me. She didn't ask about money or power. She only asked if I was doing well. I could hear regret in her tone, the weight of years spent watching me pushed aside while she stayed quiet. She admitted she felt torn, trapped between my father's control and the love she had hidden away from me. I listened, but I didn't let her off easily. Silence had been her choice for too long, and it had cost both of us. Through it all, I didn't gloat. I didn't show off or throw my success in their faces. My revenge was never about shouting or proving myself at their table. It was about the life I built far away from their shadows. Every business I owned, every property I signed for, every step I took on my own was proof enough. I no longer needed my father's money, my sister's approval, or my mother's protection. My independence was the revenge, my silence the answer. I had thought I wanted to hurt them the way they hurt me, but the truth was different. The real power came when I realized I didn't need them at all.